Now back to Code 0.5.
The Oklahoma County District Attorney at the time, David Prater, filed a motion to dismiss all charges against Ruiz and Massey, but the charges were dismissed without prejudice, meaning that they could be charged again if evidence were to ever surface. Attorneys and public defenders representing the defendants called the investigation very poor, citing the lack of any real evidence. So I guess Ruiz was released from jail, having been held without bail for 7 months. Massey, on the other hand, would remain incarcerated pending a trial for drug trafficking. He would later be sentenced to 10 years in prison for possession and distribution of methamphetamine. So with both of them, with Ruiz being released and Massey doing time, it had to start over from the very beginning.
Wait a minute, back up. You know how you talked about her getting picked up at the Newcastle Casino?
Mm-hmm.
There was a second vehicle involved.
Yeah, there was the truck with the guys, and then there was another car that was behind that had women in it that were seemingly telling her not to get in the truck with those guys.
Oh,
and
okay.
they can't locate who any of the guys are or ID any of the women that were involved either, because they could give parts of that timeline and what was going on at that time, but they never ID'd any of them. Yeah. And then about that time, because I guess once they were released, of course, Ruiz was released and Massey was still in custody. They had to start all over again. That's when things really started falling apart, because one of the investigators was let go from the police department.
And you said something about civil rights suit or something got filed as well too, right?
Yeah, so it says here the one that spearheaded the investigation was let go from the police department. It was discovered that evidence was missing from the police property room, and he was ID'd as the most likely culprit. He would later be charged with 11 counts of larceny of a controlled dangerous substance. Just before the case went to trial, all charges would be dropped. More than a year later, he was reinstated into the police force with back pay, causing him to immediately retire with benefits and pension. But the damage had already been done. So that immediately put a stain on the entire department that had been handling the case.
So was he accused of stealing drugs out of the evidence room? But was it pertinent to that case or just a case?
Just a case.
But he was able to come back a year later, so... So he didn't take it?
Maybe they didn't have enough, insufficient.
Just before the case went to trial, all charges would be dropped. More than a year later, he was reinstated to the police force with back pay, causing him to immediately retire with benefits. And then a few months after that, another official was terminated. A lieutenant that was one of the primary investigators was let go following an internal investigation. He was the third officer to be let go in a short period of time, and the second one with active involvement in Karina Saunders' murder investigation.
Jesus Christ.
But he would eventually be reinstated through arbitration, and the Bethany Police Department had taken a huge PR hit, seizing the opportunity. The man that police had labeled one of their primary suspects, Luis Ruiz, decided to file a lawsuit against the city and their police department, because both the guys that had been dealing with him were let go. So he filed a lawsuit in 2014. He specifically named the chief, both investigators in that case, claiming that in addition to them failing to uphold the law, they had employed deceptive, misleading, and manipulative illegal tactics to manipulate and fabricate a criminal case. That lawsuit filed by him included claims of more than 10 civil rights violations and critiqued the manner in which the entire investigation had played out.
Did he win that lawsuit?
So 2016, he got into more legal trouble because he had some driving infractions and continued drug use and issues. He settled his lawsuit with the Bethany Police Department for approximately $50,000. But it seemed to confirm what many had suspected with Bethany's investigation into Karina Saunders' murder, not only that it was misguided, but that it had perhaps damaged the very integrity of the case itself. So...
Could you imagine if you're a prosecutor trying to take that case to court?
Being prosecutable, depending on what was corrupted.
Yeah, you're basically going after people in like a drug and human trafficking ring, but then
Your lead investigator gets accused of stealing drugs from the evidence locker.
yeah.
That's pretty bad.
Well, a little while later, the badasses at OSBI took over. They kept looking into it. More than 5 years after her death, they began focusing on the people that had surrounded her in her final days, and one of the names that kept popping up on their radar was Kenny Richards.
Which was the guy that got her from Taco Bell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It says here, I guess he and Carina had an entangled relationship that many believe was built on toxic behaviors and sex trafficking.
Yep.
And the rumors were that Kenny was Carina's pimp.
Yeah.
See, if you recall, Kenny was one of the last known people to see her. He had a checkered relationship with her. On September 28th, 2011, 2 weeks before her death, Kenny had picked Carina up from a Taco Bell. He told police that Carina and he had hung out together before he dropped her off at an apartment complex along Rockwell Avenue later that day. That, he said, was the last time he had seen her, and they had no reason to doubt him originally, but in the months after Carina's murder, suspicion was cast on Kenny again. Because in March of 2012, Kenny had reported the death of another young woman who was a 22-year-old exotic dancer who worked at night trips.
I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
Her death was viewed suspicious by police as it was believed she had endured trauma before her death, but Richards was not charged with any involvement.
Was there an investigation into that death?
No. That indirectly tied him to 2 dead young women in the span of 1 year, one of which Richards himself had reported to police. At that point, police were already neck deep in the case against Ruiz and Jimmy Massey and likely did not want to disrupt that.
So was the exotic dancer's death, was that in Bethany as well or somewhere else?
It doesn't say.
It doesn't say.
But we're getting to some good stuff here now because in January 2013, a pair of anonymous tips were received by the Bethany police. So we had 2. Both of which claimed that Kenny Richards had killed Karina Saunders and then buried her clothing and personal items on his property. In particular, one tip alleged that he had buried these items in a metal tank on a piece of property he owned from February of 95 to June of 2012, having sold it less than a year after Karina's death. These tips were filed by investigators but seemed to collect dust for the next couple of years as the case file languished. It wasn't until November of 2016, more than half a decade after her murder, that official interest in Kenny Richards was revived by the OSBI. And in that month, a cell phone belonging to Kenny was confiscated during a methamphetamine arrest, and a digital search warrant yielded a photograph of Karina Saunders. That was a picture that investigators had not yet seen. Details of the photo were never released to the public, but it seemed to spark some reinterest in the investigation. In April of 2017, they conducted several searches related to the tips they had received back in 2013 relating to Kenny Richards and his property. They ended up finding several items of interest, as noted by an OSBI spokesperson, which included a woman's shirt, jacket, sandals, and other junk and debris. These items were all found buried on Richards' property inside an old septic tank.
Which was part of the tip that they got.
Several years prior.
Yep.
That they never followed up on.
They, and if y'all go online, I found it on YouTube. News 9 does documentaries every now and then, and they actually interviewed this guy.
Really?
And he told them that he had raised 3 daughters. I didn't know he had kids. And he said, so the likelihood of there being women's clothing on his property is pretty high.
But buried?
Yeah, but why in the hell would they be in a septic tank?
Why would they be buried?
Yeah.
So, a spokesperson for OSBI cautioned eager reporters by stating it could be several months to determine the validity of these items and whether or not they pertain to the investigation. Officials have not made a comment about the items, so it's likely the items have since been ruled out.
I guess they were going to do like a trace DNA. That's what I would assume, to see if it had anything belonging to her on there. Sweat, bodily fluids, fibers.
So now OSBI is turning their attention from all these previously named people to the mysterious individuals she was actually last seen with. The last known location she was at, the Newcastle Casino and Gaming Center, 20 miles south of the location her body was found. She was spotting on the CCTV footage getting into the red truck on October 8th. They have not been able to identify the only known man that was inside the truck. The guy who had sleeve tattoos covering both his arms. Investigators have been unable to identify some young women that were sitting in a nearby vehicle who apparently cautioned Karina from getting in the truck. It remains unknown how many details police have about these two parties, but it is now believed that the man or men inside the red truck might be responsible for Karina's death. It says, if this sounds like a person you may know, you are cautioned to make contact with the OSBI. Also, if you are one of the women from the nearby vehicle, or you know who these people are, OSBI would love your testimony. In a press release, a spokesperson for the Bureau stated, it's worth making a note of it is that there were girls nearby in a dark car who were pleading with Karina not to go with them. To this date, we do not know who these girls were, but we would like to know who they were. If they will come forward, we'd like to talk to them to find out what they saw or what they witnessed, why they were concerned about Karina's safety in getting into this red pickup.
So, Kenny Richards, from what they've gathered, was the last person to see her alive.
Yeah, until she was found on the surveillance footage on the 8th with the red pickup and the other car.
Said he told police that after he hung out with Karina, he dropped her off at the apartment complex on Rockwell Avenue and didn't hear from her again.
But it doesn't say, because he picks her up on September 28th, but doesn't drop her off until I think it's like the 7th or 8th at that apartment complex. So it never details out, like, well, he says he hung out with her, but that's a week. You know, that's a long time. What was going on? Where were they at? What were they doing? Who were they with? Were there other parties involved? Which obviously the police aren't going to, give us the whole investigation out there on a news article.
Yeah, they're not going to release everything. I mean, there's stuff that we probably don't know that's in there that they're not releasing out to everyone. But
oh yeah,
which is weird. If I say I hung out with somebody, like, if somebody asks me later what I did this afternoon, I'm going to say, oh, I hung out with Rich and Dakota, and it's probably going to be for a couple hours, not a damn week.
Yeah.
So here's something interesting. On the 5-year anniversary of the investigation back in 2016, the OSBI announced a $10,000 reward for information leading to Karina's killer being ID'd. This was followed up in September of 2018, an anonymous donor announced a $50,000 reward. This reward, which has since expired, gave 1-month deadline for anyone to forward the rumored video of Karina's murder to their email address. Get this. don'tbeacoward13@yahoo.com. If no such video existed, then they would offer $30,000 for the identity of the killers. The reason that this anonymous donor gave the deadline is because they were sick and tired of the case remaining unsolved, and if a reward wasn't going to inspire anyone, then an escalation in the investigation certainly would. The donor announced to the press about the reward and its Halloween deadline. If nothing comes from that, then we'll hire 10 PIs. If nothing comes from that, then we'll hire 20. The people that did this should know that their days of being comfortable and their days of thinking they got away with it and that it's forgotten should end immediately. This is,
Doesn't say who the person was?
No.
I like the email address.
Be a coward.
Face of Karina Saunders continues to linger in the area on several unsolved crime posters and flyers. It also haunts prisoners in the state of Oklahoma, as Karina is the queen of spades in the Oklahoma cold case card deck, which hopes to inspire leads among convicts and other inmates. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, listeners, but
that's a pretty neat deal.
OSBI puts together pictures and like small case details on decks of cards and distributes them through the prison. And so as they're playing cards, they're looking at these people's faces and reading the stories. And if they know something, then they can get information.
Because a lot of times their cellmates will share information with them about what they did or something they haven't been convicted of or no one knows about. And then they can solve these unsolved crimes.
Yeah. I mean, I know Jason's going to do this as well before we end. But if anybody has information about the case, please forward it to the OSBI. Tips can be called in at 1-800-522-8017 or emailed to tips@osbi.ok.gov. I really think that should get looked back into because, I mean, obviously it still remains unsolved to this day. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that it sounds like they had, though.
Mm-hmm. And here's the thing is that it's going to be hard to get someone to come forward, especially if they're involved in this drug or trafficking thing that's going on, because they're going to be scared to death.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only going to take one, depending on their credibility. But I don't think credibility should play 100% into if they want to prosecute, because you never know. They could get a slam dunk or they could not, but it's worth a try with all the evidence it sounds like they have.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, essentially, to do anything, I mean, you would just have to start it all back over. Mm-hmm. Because you can't rely on anything that you have. I mean, you got names, you could go off that, but, you'd have to re-interview everyone.
Yeah.
And get, new information.
Yeah.
Well, this, and if y'all get a chance, watch that documentary that News 9 did. It was actually pretty good. Mm-hmm. There's another female involved that they were looking for, that they had gotten information from others they were talking to. Mm-hmm. But even News 9 won't say the person's name because they think that they are closely tied to it.
Really?
They don't want to get her in trouble. They wouldn't say it on the documentary. And they said that they were still looking for, I think this came out a couple of years ago. So now it makes you wonder if there was enough evidence involved, they do have enough information to charge somebody, but with all the things that happened in Bethany, if a prosecutor doesn't want to take it because of that challenge.
Mm-hmm. Which could be very likely. Or maybe they just fear, if it's not that, maybe they just fear that the circumstantial won't hold up and get a conviction. And if they go in and get a not guilty, they may not be able to refile again, depending on if they have new evidence later. Yeah. But again, I mean, we've all seen the documentaries and case studies where the whole case is circumstantial and they still got a conviction. So it would be worth the try, unless, like you said, it's because of what occurred during the investigation. I'm wondering, or almost would bet, that this Kenny Richards was the big guy involved. He knows just what to say. And if you watch his mannerisms during that interview, they even let Karina's dad talk to him. And his dad looked him right in the eye and asked him if he was involved or knows anything about it. And when he gives the answer, he puts his hands down on his legs and rubs the sweat off of his palms, answers, and then looks down immediately.
Oh, yeah.
And it's that's red flags. Sucker knows something that's going on.
That's red flags right there.
Yeah. Instant body behavior change.
And
deception.
I don't know, the more thinking I do, I bet he knows Luis and, what's his name, Massey? Mm-hmm. And he put them two up to it, or put those two guys up to it to send a message to the others. Which is weird that he's involved, or his name is getting brought up in not only Karina's murder, but then the other girl later. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and it really makes you wonder then what they did for a week before he dropped her off at the apartment. Why did he drop her off? Was there an argument? Was there a disagreement? Was there something? Because then ultimately she's found behind the grocery store. Mm-hmm. Just, 2-3 days later, 4 days later.
Yeah. Well, before she came up missing, or when she was found dead, she had found some guy, and I guess they were in a relationship or something, and he lived down in Cornwall. And her reason for going down there was because she was trying to get away from the drugs and that life and that kind of stuff. And I wish I could remember his name. But he was interviewed as well. And he had taken her to, I think it was a trailer park. And it was somewhere near or close to the Valley Brook. But he didn't take her to a specific trailer. She wanted dropped off at the entrance.
In Valley Brook?
Yeah, something in Valley Brook got brought up somehow.
I know Valley Brook, but
And
I
he
think
said,
everybody knows Valley Brook.
yeah. And he said after he dropped her off that he never heard from her again. Because I guess that was her whole intentions, was she was trying to get away from whatever was going on. I'm trying to find it.
Let's see. I've got...
Yeah, she met the guy, in rehab. And this was September 18th, 2011. Yeah, I got this stuff wrote down somewhere.
Well, I'm sure that guy has been interviewed, but it would be interesting to see what he said. You know, if he's trying to help her escape the life that she's been living, I'm sure somebody had some words with him, or maybe more. So it'd be interesting to see what he knows.
Yeah, the news interviewed the guy, and he was one of those that they distorted his voice and covered his face up. So I guess he's afraid of something that might happen too. But
so he may not even say what happened then.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like she was trying to get away from it, and then for whatever reason they had a disagreement, or maybe she just couldn't stay away from it, and whatever she was doing was going to lead him back into drugs or something, and then they parted ways.
Oh, wow. I've got the actual affidavits here. Affidavit of probable cause for Massey.
What's it say?
It says, duly sworn upon oath to pose and state. Okay. October 13th, 2011, the Bethany police responded to a call of a suspicious odor in the 7100 block of Northwest 23rd in the city of Bethany. Upon arrival, officers found that a human fetal body had been dumped in a field a short distance from the Homeland grocery store located there. The body had been dismembered and placed in a bag. During the investigation, the identity of the body was confirmed by the medical examiner's office from tattoos and dental records as that of 19-year-old Karina Saunders. Saunders had been reported as a missing person from Oklahoma City in early October 2011. During the course of the investigation, the name of Country was developed. I guess his nickname is Country or Big Country. Was developed as a possible suspect. The name Country was found to be the nickname of a subject identified as Jimmy Lee Massey. At the same time that the Saunders homicide investigation was going on, there was corresponding task force investigation going on, which linked Jimmy Massey to a group of other individuals that were moving very large amounts of methamphetamine. As a result of that investigation, Jimmy Lee Massey was taken into custody on trafficking and conspiracy charges on November 4th, 2011. Massey was transported to the Bethany Police Department and interviewed. After waiving his Miranda rights and while video recorded, Massey gave a statement admitting that he was present when Karina Saunders was murdered and viewed it. During the investigation, a witness was found identified as redacted, who said that she was at the location where the homicide occurred just prior to it occurring, and it's redacted, said that the location was a two-story house located at 3500 South Harvey. Witness said that she left the residence shortly after Karina Saunders arrived with the second girl. She stated that Jimmy Massey, who she also knew as Country, was at the residence when she left. The date of this incident was determined as October 11th by the girl that arrived with Saunders at the location. Witness later stated that she witnessed the murder of Saunders and jumped out a window to escape. While Jimmy Massey was in Oklahoma County Jail on drug charges, he communicated with 2 different detainees. One detainee is identified here as JL. Massey told JL that he was involved in the homicide and described the fact that they had cut the girl's arms and legs off. That information has not been made public, and only those persons at the autopsy and involved in the investigations have that knowledge. To the second detainee, Jimmy Massey actually gave a handwritten statement in the form of past notes describing what parts of the body were dismembered, and perhaps more importantly, how the body was wrapped prior to disposal. Those same notes have been compared to known samples of Massey's handwriting and appear to be from the same person on initial examination. Those same notes are in BPD evidence. Massey's description of the material used to wrap the body was very specific to the actual material that the body was wrapped in. Again, nobody has that information except those directly involved in the autopsy, investigation, or the homicide. Based on my investigation, I believe the defendant to be guilty of murder in the first degree.
Okay, something else is going on.
There has to be. If they knew exactly what the body was wrapped in and that's not been released, I mean, they know how she was dismembered. They know about the murder. They know details about the autopsy. They know the location and exactly how she was found, how she was wrapped inside these bags.
Yep.
How could they know these things unless the person that did that told them every single detail, or they did it themselves? That's a little mind-blowing that their charges were dismissed.
It's insane.
There has to be more there. That's crazy.
That's the affidavit. That's a photocopy of the affidavit.
Yeah, I pulled it up while you were reading it, and I was reading it along with you. That's crazy. That is crazy. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's the one I was reading too, the redacted version.
Yeah, send that to me.
That's crazy. There has to be more there, whether it was something that law enforcement did that, harmed the case, or something that someone else did in the case that harmed the case that couldn't result in prosecution, there has to be something there that we'll never know every detail, because they're not going to release that to the public, but there has to be something there. That's crazy.
Yeah, because it keeps saying the men were released due to a lack of evidence.
There's
so
evidence right there.
There's so much evidence.
Cooked. Bro is cooked. I'm telling you. There's no way.
We've prosecuted cases in this county with less evidence than that. There is a lot of evidence in that case. Well, even if it's just testimonial, circumstantial, whatever, physical, there's a lot of evidence in this case. That's crazy.
So they have these guys. They have a witness that can describe how it was done, what they were wrapped in, and everything. And that information was not released to anyone.
Nope.
But nothing is happening because there's a lack of evidence.
Yeah, and they say that, the individual saw the video, was able to identify the perpetrators in the video, and then they brought that to law enforcement. They haven't seen the video themselves, but they do have the testimonial of them. And then OSBI says they found that photo that they'd never seen before in that Kenny man's phone or whatever, which it doesn't say. That'd be interesting to know what kind of photo it was. But if it sparked back interest on the investigation, it's got to be something. It can't just be a regular photo of a person. There's got to be something in the photo.
I think
that's crazy.
Carina was trying to get out of this shit.
Yeah.
Because there's a timeline that I found, and it was August 2011. Carina was checked in at Valley Hope Rehabilitation Center, but she left the program early, and she moved to Kanawha, Oklahoma, with a man she had met in rehab. And I guess she stayed with him for quite some time.
Does it give a name?
He doesn't want to be involved.
Identified.
September 18th, Carina visits her father, Richard Saunders. Saunders drops Carina off at a baby shower with her high school friends. Carina sleeps at her mother's house in Mustang that night. Then I guess Carina attended church with her mother, Margie. She gave her life to Christ after spending the day together. Margie Queen's her mom's name. Queen takes Carina back to Kanawha. And then says Carina and her mother say goodbye for the last time. On September 18th, Karina leaves Conowall and is dropped off in Valley Brook. And then the 22nd to the 28th, approximate dates, Karina stayed at her cousin's house in northeast Oklahoma City. The 28th, the cousin, Catherine Jo Bloodworth, dropped her off at the Taco Bell near I-40 in Rockwell, and Karina gets into a Chevy Blazer with a man police identified as Kenny Richards.
And then later, Kenny Richards has buried women's property in a septic tank on his property.
Yeah, because normal people do that shit.
After the murder.
Yeah, that's just a normal thing. I bet if you went to my house and looked in my septic tank, I would probably have a fucking T-shirt in there of my kids or something.
Yeah, that's just...
Because if I didn't put it in the septic tank myself, we flushed that shit down the toilet.
Well, it'd be interesting to know what was actually found in the septic tank, because Karina didn't look like she was a very big girl. She seemed very small in stature, and depending on, he says, oh, I have female daughters, that I've raised and so on. Well, what were their sizes? What were the sizes of the clothing found in? What was the maturity level of the clothing? Were they children's clothing, adult clothing, teenage? What were the size? Obviously, we won't know that, but it'd be interesting to know.
October 6th or 7th, Karina spotted by a high school friend at the Studio 41 apartments near Northwest 41st Street and MacArthur. This is the friend that gives her, our high school friend that gave her a bag and then fed her, and I can't remember his name. It's not on here. It says Karina and Judy Roberts stay at James Donaldson's house the same day. Karina becomes hallucinatory and leaves with Roberts and an unknown Hispanic man, according to a search warrant. And then October 8th, Karina spotted on surveillance cameras at Newcastle Casino. That's when she gets into a red four-door Ford pickup with a brush guard and lights on top. And then the 9th, which they say, I guess she was found on the 13th, and it could have happened within a few days before that. That's when this Kyle Savage sends a message about the burying whoever.
Which would make sense, though, because they found her on the 13th and she was already decomposing. So, if she was out in the weather for several days, that would make sense.
October 10th was when the mother and cousin filed a missing person report. The threatening text the cousin received the day prior were given to police, although it was redacted in the report. What the hell? And it says 13th. This is a timeline of the events. Was when she is found by two people. It says 2 people were feeding feral cats in the field behind the grocery store at blah, blah, blah. They called Bethany Police Department and reported a foul odor. It says investigators announced the remains were wrapped in plastic and placed in a black Nike duffel bag and a smaller black laundry bag.
Well, the plastic that the 2 individuals named in their arrest affidavit had specific details about.
Yeah.
Which is, again, mind-blowing.
Okay, and then I guess the 17th is when her remains were identified. There's got to be more to it, and they won't. From what News 9 was saying in their investigation is that nobody will release anything because it's an ongoing investigation.
But, it may be an ongoing investigation, but here we are, that's 2011, it's fixing to be 2025. Why would we not feed even a small amount of information to the public to try to get that information pumping back in for the investigation? Obviously, there's a lot of things you can't release. We know that as law enforcement, but there's got to be something they can release to help get information coming in.
Yeah, and speaking of helping getting information, if y'all will take this podcast and share it, tell people about it, let them listen to it, then there's got to be somebody out there that was friends with Ruiz or Massey or Richards or knew of them or something that might have seen something. And I know, y'all are saying, well, they were found there was no evidence or whatever. You know what? Bullshit. From what I'm reading, those suckers knew something or were involved somehow.
Well, we didn't even put every detail of the case in here. There are so many other articles, and there's YouTube videos, and I mean, there's a lot of information that we didn't talk about today.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
The wheels are turning over there.
They are, because I'm just thinking I should get my hands on that case file. I want to read it, and I want to start doing some stuff.
Her husband's going to message us or something and go, damn you guys. I'm like, what? She took off a week from work and is hanging around Bethany and Valley Brook.
Yeah.
Staking out all the places.
Yeah. Next thing we know, she's on the news and she's got freaking Richards or whoever in handcuffs walking him in somewhere.
Right.
I've got my little tiny rake. I'm raking through that lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mind is turning. I wish I could get my hand on that file.
Yeah. And
Crazy.
I know, and I've heard other people say this, but of all the investigators that I've met and talked to, the one you don't, if you're like the criminal and the person you don't want working on your case, that's Dakota. Because, yeah, she will not let up.
Oh, no. I will find out every detail. I will find out what nurse was working your floor in the labor and delivery room when you were born.
Oh, yeah.
I'll find it all.
I believe it.
I will find everything.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a way that we could get some more of this information from OSBI and all that.
Well, with it being an open investigation, I doubt they'll give a lot of it.
Probably not.
Somebody knows something.
Oh,
Yeah. And I'll put down in the episode description links that you can go to and the phone number that Rich mentioned earlier, that if you've got any information as to, I mean, anything that you can call and contact people. The sketch too? Oh, yeah, the guy. Yeah, I'll put that on there. Everything that we've read and talked about, I'll put links to that on there too. I think where Rich found that affidavit, if y'all guys wanted to read it too for yourself and see all the information that they had at the time. There's got to be something more to it. Something else had to have happened for them to say that there's a lack of evidence, even though seems to be an enormous amount of it. Yeah, because now, I mean, there's no weapon. They don't know where the saw is and that, or knife or whatever was used. So, but I mean, golly.
Well, it doesn't even, I'd be interested to read the autopsy as well to see if there were any, like, marks on the bone or anything that would indicate what type of blade was used. Was it, I know it said saw, but that broke. So what else was used? What other type of markings are going to be that would indicate if it was like a straight blade, a deer knife, an electric something? I mean, whatever. There's got to be something. But again, that was a long time ago, and that may not even exist anymore. Those weapons.
Yeah.
Long destroyed.
Oh, dadgummit. There you go.
I have so many questions.
Ask and you shall receive.
Ooh. Yeah, I'll have to read all this because
I'll put a link where everybody can read that because this, I mean, you know, sometimes law enforcement and news media bump heads, but the media can be a great asset too. But News 9 looks like they did a great job working up the story and trying to get all the information that they could. So I'll put a link to their investigation that they had done because they have, from what I saw just then, there's a bunch of like search warrants on there, arrest warrants, affidavits. There's a medical examiner's report. I mean, everything. And I know there's some kind of internet sleuth out there that's going to get a hold of this and be able to put everything together. Did you know there's like a society or something on the internet you can join, and it's a group of people, and that's all they do is their internet
She
sleuths?
probably started it.
Yeah, probably.
I'm just.
Do y'all have to
people's
watch true
closets.
crime stuff at the house a lot?
It's always on.
It's always on. That's right. I watch every documentary there is. And I like to read research articles too.
Yeah.
I like to creep on people.
See, I get on YouTube and watch people do stupid shit. And then my wife watches the true crime crap. Like, who was the dude that, like, killed his wife and put him in, like, a barrel or something? And
Oh,
the
it's on
kids,
Investigation
too,
ID. Oh.
Chris something?
Watts. Chris Watts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've
Shannon
seen that
Watts and
one.
the children, yeah.
Yeah, we've seen that one probably 2 or 3 times. I mean,
It's a good documentary. They did a good job on that.
yeah, they did.
You know, he threw those children in the oil barrels while they were alive. They were still alive. They were small children.
I didn't know they were still alive.
Yeah, they were still alive.
But yeah. Anyway, I think we're going to go ahead and call this one quits. And I'll close it out with this. Let's see. So the case is still unsolved, like we've been telling you, and investigators occasionally are releasing new information seeking the public help. There's been speculation about the involvement of organized crime, a drug ring, or even someone close to Carina. But without concrete evidence, the case remains one of Oklahoma's most chilling mysteries. Karina Saunders was a young woman with her entire life ahead of her. Her murder is a grim reminder of the dangers lurking in our communities and the urgency to protect and seek justice for the vulnerable. If you have any information about Karina's case, please contact the Bethany Police Department or the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. Her family deserves answers, and Carina deserves justice. I want to thank you guys for listening to today's episode. Thanks, Dakota, for coming on with us. Surely we can get her back on here again. And let us know if you guys like hearing this kind of stuff, or you like hearing us just talk about the dumb shit that we do. But anyway, we're going to get off here, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Later.
You have been listening to Code 0.5, the lighter side of police work. If you have ideas or suggestions for our show, we'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at code05.co. That's code05.co. And please consider making a donation at our Patreon page, patreon.com/code05. Be sure to use the digits 05. Thanks for listening to Code 0.5.